Star Trek Picard is finally here. In this video, I share the major things that jumped out to me as references to past Star Trek. Also beware, this video is full of spoilers for the first Picard episode, Remembrance. Okay, there is so much in the opening scene. We see the Enterprise D. We hear the same old hum of the engines. We see the 10 Forward Lounge where the crew used to relax all the time. We see Data. We see Picard playing poker, which he famously did not do until the final scene of the last episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. We see Picard having tea and using the same old teacup. We also hear Blue Skies, which was a big part of Star Trek Nemesis.
Blue skies, smiling at me.
The version of Blue Skies used in this episode is sung by Bing Crosby, who was the grandfather of Denise Crosby. Denise Crosby played Tasha Yar, and later Tasha's half-Romulan, half-human daughter, Sela. Picard wakes up from his dream and we see he's living on Chateau Picard, his family's vineyard in France, which he visited during The Next Generation. And he has a dog named Number One. Hey, he used to call his first officer Number One.
Make it so, Number One.
And of course, Number One goes all the way back to the original Star Trek pilot.
What are we running here? A cadet ship, Number One? Are we ready or not?
All decks are ready, sir.
And then more recently, Star Trek Discovery. Picard also speaks a little French to Number One, and even though Picard has that beautiful British accent, we know that he loves his French language.
The French language, for centuries on Earth, represented civilization.
Indeed.
We jump over to Boston, where the skyline has lots of references to Star Trek Deep Space Nine. My favorite is the sign for the London Kings, Captain Sisko's favorite baseball team, and we actually met Buck Buckeye, who played shortstop for the Kings and who, in 2026, broke Joe DiMaggio's record for the most consecutive games with a hit in a single season. We find Daj in Boston, and she is with her boyfriend, who is a Zahian, aliens that we met on Star Trek Discovery in Season 2. Picard does an interview with the Federation News Network. Jake Sisko also once worked for Federation News Service. We also see a picture of Worf here, and hopefully this means that any Klingons in this show will look like they did in Star Trek The Next Generation, and maybe not Star Trek Discovery. The interview pulls out lots of Picard's character, including his love of history, archaeology, and his strong principles. We also hear more about the supernova that destroyed the Romulan homeworld. The interview scene also gives us a new meme! After the interview, Picard asks Number One if he knows who said,
"There's no legacy as rich as honesty."
That's a line from Shakespeare, and we know that Jean-Luc loves his Shakespeare.
All the galaxy is a stage. World, not galaxy. All the world's a stage. Well, if he were living now, he would have said galaxy.
During Picard's talk with Daj, she asks if he's ever been a stranger to himself, and he says many, many times, and he is so right about that, especially if you recall the times that he mind-melded with Sarek, at the time he was assimilated by the Borg, the time when an alien probe forced him to live out 30 years of another man's life in the span of 25 minutes, or maybe even the time when he was possessed by energy. There's a lot to choose from there. We then get another dream of Data. This time he's painting. Remember how Data was a painter? And Picard and Data are back in their old Starfleet uniforms. Picard wakes up and thinks he recognizes Daj from a painting that Data did, and he goes to visit his archives to see it. Those archives are a real treat. While Picard is looking around in his archives, we also hear a few notes from Jerry Goldsmith's Star Trek theme. There at the door is a model of the Stargazer, the first ship Picard ever commanded. Some Klingon weapons. We see the Shakespeare book Picard kept in his ready room, the Captain Picard Day banner that the kids on the Enterprise made for him, a model of the Enterprise E, and then the earlier Enterprise D, and I think if you look carefully in the background there, you'll see the artifact that Picard's Starfleet Academy professor gave him. I am really glad to see Picard has that because he seemed to be really into it when he got it. but it also appears that he tossed it aside at the end of Star Trek Generations.
Is this it?
Picard goes on to find Data's painting titled Daughter, and it does sort of bear a resemblance to the android daughter Data once created. Picard and Daj then have the sweetest talk, and seriously, the way Picard talks about Data here, it almost brought me to tears. It is beautiful. And then they get attacked by Romulans. Picard recovers from the attack and says he's just tired of hanging out and writing history books. I love the idea of Jean-Luc writing history books, and we know that Jean-Luc loves his books.
All I require is to sit in the sun, read my book, alone.
Picard goes to see Dr. Agnes Jurati at the Daystrom Institute. The Daystrom Institute has been referenced many times and is named for Dr. Richard Daystrom, who we saw in an episode of the original series. Dr. Jurati once worked for Bruce Maddox. Bruce Maddox is the man who wanted to disassemble Data and recreate many more like him. Dr. Jurati also has B4, Data's prototype, in a drawer, and explains that Data's memory transfer to B4 in Star Trek Nemesis failed. Cut to a new version of a Romulan warbird and some very familiar Romulan theme music. And the camera pulls back to reveal that the Romulans are on a Borg cube. So, what stood out to you about this episode? What Easter eggs did I miss? Leave me a comment, and thanks for watching.